speaker is Dave Piscitello, and Dave is going to talk about detecting DNS abuse.
Good morning. I appreciate that I'm keeping you all from lunch, and we're already quite a bit behind. Excuse me? Oh, we're on time. I thought it was 11:30. Great. Then disregard that. Ignore the man behind the screen. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you about a project that has been 5 or 6 years in the thought process and about a year and a half to 2 years in development. We now call it the Domain Abuse Reporting Tool, and it is a platform that we have developed in conjunction with a third party who is doing the majority of the implementation work for us. We've worked with them in tandem to do the design and do some of the selection of some of the data that we've been using. So the platform is intended to report domain names, domain name registrations, and abuse behavior across the entire TLD space. Currently, our ambition is tied to the GTLD space because these are the domain registries that we can access using legacy means for zone file access and using the centralized zone data access service. We also are going to be using Whois to correlate or associate domain names with registrars. I'll talk about some of the challenges of collecting these data during the rest of the report. There have been many studies that have been performed to try to understand abuse in the domain name space and in the IP space. Almost all the studies have some limitations. One of the things that we were trying to do was overcome some of these limitations. For example, most studies don't include all the TLD registries and registrars. Most studies typically focus on one kind of security threat and on a small number of reputation feeds or block lists. In particular, academic studies don't have the wherewithal financially to go and subscribe to commercial feeds for block lists, and they can't do so over a very, very long period of time. So our corpus of data includes multiple commercial lists that we pay for on a monthly and annual subscription basis. And finally, especially outside of academic research, it's very hard to find reports that are unbiased and that are transparent in the sense that their methodologies are documented and transparent in the sense that they identify the data sets. And so the problem with a lot of these studies is that the findings of the studies are not reproducible by a third party. We're trying to overcome all of these in our project. So the primary goal of this project is not to measure or to judge or to assess or rank. It is to provide the ICANN community with data where we can support policy development process by having an unbiased, large, reliable corpus of data and a persistent data that would be available and could be used to look at studies on a daily basis and also on a historic basis over time. The kinds of things that we imagine the data could be used for is to help identify threats reported at a TLD or registrar level. We believe that there is a need to be able to track security threats, domain registration activity, and adds and deletes and correlate those at a TLD or registrar level. Most importantly, from my perspective, is we want to be able to help operators understand or consider how to manage their reputations. The goal of this is to show the ICANN community and TLD operators worldwide what the internet community at large and internet users and organizations that consume or use domain names see through the lens of their block list or their reputation service providers. This is a very, very important optic for you because this is your reputation, and this is where people make increasingly coarse decisions about what they are going to allow or block in their security systems, their firewalls, their mail relays, their web application content filters, and the like. So we think that this is a very important amount of, or corpus of data that we could present to the community and allow the community to assess what policy is necessary or what actions they might want to take voluntarily. So this is a fairly large undertaking, and the majority of the effort that we have exerted in putting this system together has been the collection of data. We use right now we are up to 1,236 top-level domains that actually yesterday crossed the 194 million domain count, and we are currently focused on GTLDs. However, since Copenhagen, we've had expressions of interest from several country code TLDs. Yesterday, someone from .at expressed an interest. Earlier in the week, I visited the ES registry. They expressed an interest. And so I may be overly ambitious, but I would really hope that ultimately we would be able to have the entire TLD space. One of the issues that we face is that as consumers of our own dog food, so to speak, we use the centralized domain registration access service, and there are some fragilities in that service, to be kind. And so some of them have to do with policy. We have trouble with application rejections for certain TLDs. We have trouble with the renewal period. Every 90 days, some of the registries terminate our daily download, which means that we have gaps in our data. So when you're trying to do a 30-day assessment or a longer assessment, and you're missing 3 or 4 days every 90 days, it becomes really challenging. So we've had to build in some algorithmic adjustments in the way that we do our calculations to accommodate that. And so hopefully, I know the ICANN Security Stability Advisory Committee is going to be making some comments about CZDS, and hopefully this will help us firm up that program itself. We're also looking at other means of acquiring zones. We also use WHOIS for every day that we pull down a zone. We attempt to collect the WHOIS of the new registrations. Originally, our plan was with our copious spare time, trolling WHOIS, we would start to go back and reaffirm some of the WHOIS that we already have collected. Unfortunately, with the prevalence of rate limiting in the WHOIS service across so many operators, we are unable to actually get the full number of WHOIS records to correlate to the daily new registrations. This is actually impeding us to the point where our registrar data is not ready for public consumption or public review because we don't have it all, and we're not going to put out a partial sample. When we use domain names, we do not use every domain that is registered by a TLD. We use names that appear in the zone and can resolve. And the reason why we do so is because if a name doesn't have a glue or it doesn't have a record to point to a name server and can't resolve, it is not a threat. So finally, we do something that I think is unique in most of the studies. We use multiple domain and URL abuse data sets that count spam, phishing, malware, host, botnet C2 domain names, and we also count total abuse domains and cumulative abuse domains over a 365-day period. Obviously, we've been doing this for less than 365 days, but the data will be present hopefully 6 months from now. The user interface that we currently have, that's our sort of management console, allows us to create histograms, create some visualizations, create day-in-the-life views. It also allows us to search the abuse database by argument. And so we are able to pull down on any given day the domain names that are associated with a particular security threat and with a particular operator, registry or registrar. Okay, thank you. And we do a fairly comprehensive deduplication of the process. The only place where you'll see some deviations in duplication is that if we use two reputation lists, and one reputation list identifies a domain as a phishing domain and another identifies it as a spam domain, which can happen. The total count will be incremented by 1, and the cumulative total count will be incremented by 1, but there will also be an increment of 1 for the spam and 1 for the phishing. So if you look at the individual security threats and you add them up, it could be in fact larger than the total for that day or that month. As I said, we use many reputation threats, and I can give you a quick list of those if you are interested. We use all the serval sublists. We use the spam house domain block list, anti-phishing working group, and fish tank. We use about 12 lists that are composite from malware patrol, ransom tracker, and Fido tracker. We are looking at, we're constantly looking for new feeds. We think that the abuse data that we're collecting right now is a good representation of what I call high confidence feeds across the industry. These are the feeds that are most commonly used by commercial security systems that protect billions of users daily. For example, Spamhaus claims that they protect over 3 billion email user accounts. Serval has similarly large numbers. We also use only reputation data sets that have been used by academia and that have been, in some cases, rated or assessed by academia and thought to be a low and false positive. Partly one of the things that we wanted to make certain we did was we used the lists that are most commonly used and sort of create the optic or create the lens for users of domain names, commercial, organizational, and private. So the goal is to reflect how parties external to ICANN see the domain ecosystem. The system's extensible. One of the things that we will begin experimenting with when we've settled down with the registrar part of the problem space that we're trying to tackle is adding and removing data from our reputation data feeds to see if there are any changes with the way that that the reporting, especially some scoring, might occur. Some people have come up to us and talked to us about why we use multiple data sets. We did a fair amount of research in the academic papers to understand whether this was valuable. There's a very fine paper by Metcalf and Singh, Spring rather, that shows that there's very little overlap among block lists. The reason why is because many block lists are based on things like spam traps, and spam traps are essentially infrastructure. They're not necessarily all global. They have some different different methodologies for determining and rating an email message or a website for content and for abuse. And it turns out that the overlap is very, very small. We actually experimented in-house with this. We wrote some scripts that went out and looked at 86 different block lists and ran millions of domains through those. I'm sorry, not millions, tens of thousands of domains through those to see how many times we came up with multiple hits. And overwhelmingly, we would get 1. We would sometimes see 2, 3, but we would never see 86. There was never an instance of more than 10 that I can recall. So we're fairly confident at this point that The data feeds that we use have a good industry reputation. They all use the threat classification that suits our purposes. There's a fair consensus adoption across the operational security community that they are high quality, and they're frequently cited in academic literature. I think I just covered that, yes. We're not focused on scoring. We think that the consumers of the data that we are putting together should tell us what kinds of scores that we should generate and what kind of metrics we should generate. And input to the Internet Health Indicators project is going to be very valuable in us sort of shaping what kinds of metrics will be used. And in fact, Alan and his ITHI project are probably going to be one of the consumers of the data that we are warehousing. The only scoring that we're currently doing is a very, very simple abuse score, which is basic arithmetic. We take the abuse-listed domains on a given day, we put that over the domains in the zone on that day, and we multiply it by 100. So this merely shows us a percentage, and it's the only one that we've done thus far. We're experimenting with some others, but before we actually use them, we'll be soliciting some community input. We'd actually like to hear people tell us what kinds of metrics they would like us to reproduce or to produce, and then we would go and work with our vendor to try to implement them. We do the same scoring for registrar as we do for registry. There are a number of different applications that we can see that might be valuable. The TLD or registrar operators might be interested in having the data to isolate some causes of abnormal registration or abuse behaviors. There's been anecdotal allegations that promotional pricing attracts malicious users. It would be nice if we actually had data to correlate with that. There are anecdotal allegations that bulk registrations are exploited by malicious actors. Well, it would be nice if we had data for that. So, so those kinds of behaviors may be something that we can derive from the data. Identifying flocking behavior, I know that those of you who have been following, the spam or other security threats in the new TLD space have seen patterns of, hitting one particular registry for a fairly long period of time. If that registry starts to improve, you move on to another. The same is alleged to happen in the registrar space. So having data that shows us those data points is probably very, very valuable. And I think most importantly, there is no one that I know that was going to have as much data as we have in a persistent repository that is going to be available for historical analysis. We think that there are opportunities where we may be able to share some data with the operational community or with contractual compliance, not necessarily to do anything more than confirm some of the information that they've received from a complainant. One of the other consumers that has expressed interest in the work that we've done is the Consumer Competence and Trust review team. They are very keen to try to have as much historical data to, especially in the new TLD program, to assess how the program has been adopted or accepted by the broader internet community. So, what you got left? Oh, good. All right. So right now, the access to our reporting system is in-house only. It is in beta. As I said, we are working on solving some problems that we have in data collection. We will be sharing views of what we do. If you are interested in seeing a little demonstration, takes maybe 5-10 minutes. I'm happy to turn that on anytime while I'm here. I'm not going to project it and have people start throwing tomatoes at me. And so we're looking at soliciting the community on the reaction to collecting the data, what kind of reporting we might want to do, what kind of metrics we might want to measure, and how we might be able to provide access. One of the things that we are encumbered by in the development system is we have a right to share derivative data, not direct feed data. So, for example, we can give someone a list of domains that we have extracted based on some algorithm. We could not give you direct access to some of the feeds that we have because they are licensed specifically for our use. However, you could go and obtain the exact same subscription and produce the same results. Hopefully, yeah. I'll just give you a quick picture of some of the things that we do capture. On our dashboard, we show summaries, the total number of TLDs that we are monitoring or gathering reporting from, the number of TLDs with at least one incident, and the same for registrars, and then the overall abuse score. And so the overall abuse score, when compared to your own abuse score, would give you some sense of your deviation from the mean. Right? For each TLD, we can identify an abuse score, total registrations, total number of domains that were listed for abuse, and then we break it down to spam, phishing, malware, and botnet. We also can do some historical graphing. So as you can see on this particular slide, this is one of the new TLDs that has had a sudden upsurge in ads. So that's good for them. But there's an interesting sawtooth there, and we might want to go and kind of find out what that sawtooth actually represents. Right. Abuse histories, we actually have individual lines for our 4 security threats, and you can hover over any of the individual points, and it will tell you the counts of each threat. If you click off spam in most of these cases, you will drop down and have a much more granular view of malware, botnets, and phishing, and we can do that as well. And as I mentioned, we have an abuse activity that we can do on a registrar or a registry basis. You choose an operator, you choose a threat, you choose a date range, and we generate a list of domains for that range and date. Once we have that list, we can actually pivot and use some of the other the Cyber Tool Belt platform tools to do some operation or open source intelligence. We can look at DNS, we can look at some other information, we can get who is, and then do a pivot onto some social media searches. So, the tool itself is very, very good for the SSR team in helping with some operation security issues. So that's it. I know that was sort of brief, but I wanted to leave some time for questions because I imagine that there would be. Thank you very much.
Hi, it's Emily Taylor here for one of the co-chairs of the Security, Stability, Resiliency Review Team 2. Thank you very much for an excellent presentation. I have a couple of related questions. I'm not quite sure whether this is available yet. You pointed to some, that it's in beta and that there are some issues. Are you planning to make it available to researchers? Are you planning to make it available to the review team? And when will it be available?
So that's above my pay grade, but there happens to be someone above my pay grade right in front of me to answer that question.
Yeah, it's a good question. There are things in here that we have to check. It's still in beta. We have to make sure that the information is correct, whatever we do, and then we have to figure out a way to distribute it. This is one of my pet projects. I believe this is kind of you said it very carefully crafted words before, is that in our job we have to provide information in the policy process. So that's the kind of aim we're taking on it, what you need for that. But we're not there yet. So I have to come back to you on that. Thank you. Did I continue to stand here, or? And I'm speaking actually, I'm not speaking in a personal capacity this time. I'm actually speaking as the CEO.
Okay.
Back towards the microphone. Yeah.
I'm not sure if I got the answer, but it's not yet. But it really strikes me as an incredibly useful resource. There are many researchers who are attempting similar things. And by the way, your complaints about the CZDS, I totally agree with. It's a complete nightmare for researchers to work with and could do with some uplifts. But to have this sort of a data available to policymakers, law enforcement, and anybody who's interested in doing research would be an enormous benefit to the community, in my opinion.
My role is to put the data together. Yeah, and I think we're very close to to overcoming a lot of the hurdles with that. The community, and my boss have to basically decide when that's going to be made available, in what formats. One of the things that we really do need feedback for in some specifics is how you want us to measure, what kinds of reporting you want. I mean, I don't think the system would currently scale to just having people bang at it all day long with queries. We don't have an API that we believe would satisfy everyone. So there are lots of answers that we can't provide yet. Ideally, and this is just me speaking personally, this is like the greatest tools or data set that I've seen in the domain world. I really, really love it, and I play with it all the time, and I giggle, and my wife thinks I'm a madman. So, well, she thought I was a madman before she married me, and she still did. But so I'm very excited about it, and I'd love to be able to publish it.
So we have just a couple minutes left, so I would like, after David's response, to encourage you to keep the comments brief so that we can go to lunch on time.
Yeah, just very quickly, some of the issues that we're looking at regarding making the data available is a lot of the data that we're using to generate the aggregate scores and stuff that we're doing is licensed, and we have to work with the folks that we license it from to make sure that they're okay with the way we're going to be distributed. As Dave mentioned, there's some technical issues that we need to work out regarding APIs, how the data is presented, and that sort of stuff. But it is, obviously, if the community would find this data useful, it's something that we would want to provide to the community.
Morning, Dave.
Hey, yeah.
Okay, first off, as a registrar, I would love to be able to get access to data involving my own accreditation. That would be very, very useful. I do have a few concerns about making this data available to the quote-unquote community without some further discussion, because I think it could be abused by certain parties who seem to enjoy beating us all over the head without actually using any real facts or anything else. So I think you should prioritize giving access to both registrars and registries in the first instance, especially considering we're the ones paying for this. Secondly...
Can I respond to that? I know we're running out of time.
Sure.
That is my intent. At the end of the day, I would like to see all the numbers go down. And I really don't care whether that involves a two-step process or a one-step process. I don't care if it involves individual consultation. I will travel all over the world to make this number zero. So.
And secondly, if you were able to do something to show that correlation between pricing and abuse, it would be very, very helpful, because personally, I see that correlation, but I would love to see hard data, because I'm sick of registry operators pushing out these names at 25 cents, because there's no margin in that.
So I don't think you were here yesterday for the registry operators workshop, but Rick Lamb and I have some ideas about ways that we might be able to do that. It's not easily acquired data, but it really will be a very, very big addition to the data that we're collecting if we can find a way for everyone to agree to give it to us.
Denise Michelle with Facebook. I'm also a co-chair of the Security Stability Review Team, but speaking in my own company capacity. Thank you very much for this presentation. Really valuable project you're undertaking. I would just underscore Michele's point about getting more data and information on the connection between free, low-cost domains and abuse. I'd also like, and I have a number of questions, perhaps you could answer in the Adobe Connect room, since I know you're pressed for time. I'd like a little more information on specific next steps and timing. I'm assuming we won't have to wait 8 years to actually get some of this data into the public domain, but I'd like more clarity on that. I also agree with Goran that this would be really valuable for the whole ICANN community. And so I'm particularly interested in what other steps we need to address, what conversations we need to have, what barriers we need to discuss in order to start moving some of this data into the public domain so ICANN broadly can operate on an evidence-based standard. Thanks.
Thank you.
John, are you up there to
quickly respond to this?
Okay, I need to. Are you up there to answer Denise?
No,
or you
answer Denise, and then I have a comment.
So I'm absolutely positive it's not going to be 8 years because I will not be here in 8 years. So I'm not going to be working for ICANN when I'm 73 years old. Sorry. We could have that a different discussion. But I'm hoping that we will resolve the technical issues one way or another and be able to have much more reliable, especially who is information in the next quarter. My guess is that we would be production ready if we were able to do that by the September, October timeframe. We will not have an API at that point, but we intend to start generating some reports, and those reports, it will be up to Goran and the board, how those reports are handled. But I'm not building this so that I can play with it and giggle and annoy my wife. So yeah.
So just one final, I guess, request rather than comment. A lot of people have been coming to myself and David and saying, how do we get our TLD put into this? Because we are just looking at the generics at the moment, and how can we help, which I greatly appreciate. So if you're from a CCTLD and you're interested, because those are the ones we're missing, please probably send an email to Dave is probably the best way, and we'll figure out how we can do that. Like everything, this is a tool. Everything takes work. Everything costs money. So we've got to figure out how we do that. And some of the folks from the generics have been saying, how can we help you get better access to our data? Same thing. Please just come and contact us. We really want to work with the community on this. And you guys have all the cool data, and we like data. And Dave is not retiring without permission. 78, I think. You could stay till.
Thank you, Dave. So this concludes our morning session. So the lunch will be in the Florencia room, which is one floor up, and that's where we had the reception yesterday. There's a staircase just outside, and we will see you all at 1:30 in this room.
Yeah, I'd just like to remind you, if you want to see a one-on-one demo of the platform, happy to share some data with you. No photos, no screen captures, no wire captures.